The Warwolves are we, 333. Interlopers, beware our might. We don't bark first, we just bite. What's going on YouTube? Michael R. Schulteis here, author of The Rostoval Saga, which you can see, as always, on the shelf behind me. Today I'm coming at you with my review of The Warwolf, a Peasant Chronicle of the 30 Years' War by Hermann. Hopefully, I didn't butcher that German last name too much. You think I know a thing or two about German last names. So this is the story of Warwolf. He's a farmer, a Bauer in German, a word that also means builder, I'm told, in 17th century Saxony, in Germany, but back then it was part of the Holy Roman Empire. And a bit of historical context is probably a good thing here, and the book provides that. This is a story of survival and resistance during one of the worst periods in Germany's history. And this is not an exaggeration. The 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648 was just horrible. How bad? Well, let's have a little excerpt from the foreword here. Quote, "The loss of life during the 30 Years' War has been estimated at 1/5 the German population, some 21 million in 1618. While many authorities contend that the number is closer to 1/3, including those who perished in battle or from disease, deprivation, and rapine. Such trauma upon civilian populations would not be matched for another 300 years, until the 20th century's world wars, which some historians have called, quote, the Second 30 Years' War." Staggering stuff. The quick and dirty version is the Protestant princes of northern Germany are trying to get free of the Catholic Habsburgs of southern Germany and Austria. The Habsburgs have held the Holy Roman Empire for a long time. They've been the emperors, but there's a lot of autonomy in these different duchies and the like. What you have is a very complicated struggle with a lot of switching allegiances and, a lot of foreign powers dogpiling, getting involved. And our story takes place against this background. It's a story of Warwolf. The wonderful thing about this book is that it gives you the perspective of a farmer who's trying to live. That's it. He's trying to live. He's trying to take care of his family and his community. And this horrible war makes that harder and harder to accomplish. One more piece of background that is actually really important here, and the book actually opens with this, and that's the backstory on the men who live in this heathland, this wild place in Saxony, and how they cleared out the land, they've turned it to pasture, to farming, and the Wolf family is one of them, and then we have this guy Warwolf, and he's the one who is confronted with the escalating violence and depravity of the 30 Years' War. All he wants to do is just be a homesteader, a farmer, have a wife and children, see his family grow, and events make that very difficult and increasingly difficult. So this isn't a story where we have one antagonist and then it's like, we're trying to solve this one single problem. It's more like the problem itself is survival and ideally thriving. And how do you defend yourself in this environment where Germans are fighting Germans, but also, the Danes get involved. And that's a horror show by itself. The Swedes get involved. That's awful too. Here is where I tell you that the story does get very dark in some places. And horrible, awful things happen to innocent people, to women, to children. It's truly horrifying to be confronted with the depravity and the brutality of humanity, but of this particular war, and just how awful it got for so long. This takes me to one of the strengths of the story. It's the story chiefly of our protagonist. I'll say Wolf too. So Wolf becomes a lot tougher over the course of this book. He has to learn to defend himself, his family, his community, and to learn how to take vengeance. Self-defense is great, but sometimes you have to go out and harm the people who have harmed you. And that's not an easy lesson for a basically decent person to absorb. But he gets there. One of the best things about this book, and this is a very important point. The lengths that it goes to show you the human costs and consequences of war, of fighting, of killing other men, even it's justified, but it still does a real number on you. Even when you have society saying, no, you're doing your duty, it's justified, it can take an incredible toll. And that's what this book gets into with such humanity and such an incredibly well done portrayal. I think by itself, that's a great reason to go read this book. Just to understand what it's like to be a decent, ordinary guy in a very difficult, increasingly impossible situation. And you don't want to lose yourself. You don't want to become you don't want to become one of the beasts that you're trying to fight. So how do you do that? And what is the cost? What does it do to your mind, to your spirit, to your body? And this book gets into that and handles it so well. So with all the darkness, I have to say one thing I just love about this book is looking at the sense that even in the midst of all this awfulness, that there is something worth fighting for. It's your family. It's your community. There's a lot of marriage in this book. There's a lot of people getting together in the midst of this horrible war and creating families, having children. So that sense of beauty, that sense that there is something worth fighting for, it's called your wife and children. That's just absolutely marvelous, and it's so well done here. So I've talked about Wolf. He is the protagonist. He is the point of view character. He's the guy who gets the most page time. The book does a very charming and very wonderful job of bringing other characters to life too. There's a great supporting cast, but it is chiefly Wolf's story, Farmer Wolf's story. If I have one criticism of this book, it's that it's a bit heavy on exposition. It's a bit much telling for my taste, but you have to understand this was published in 1910. This is a classic German novel translated into English. So I have to give it a bit of a break for that. The style back then, the styles that people like to read were different. If you read older literature, you'll see that our modern style has shifted away from exposition and toward showing. So I'm going to factor that into my rating a little bit here. On balance, 5 out of 5. This book explores the human cost of war, the impact of war on the psyche, on the spirit, on people aging prematurely. And that, I think, alone makes it very worthwhile. It's in many ways the most sensitive, moving, human portrait of that I think that I can remember reading ever. There's a very bitter irony for me, just a tragic irony. Reading this book, seeing this human portrayal of the costs of war, and knowing that it's 1910. We have 4 years to go before the Great War tears Europe apart. If that's not sad, I don't know what is. History may not repeat exactly, but it sure does rhyme sometimes. So who's this book for? Well, do you like historical fiction? Do you like stories of survival, of resistance, of families building a new life in a challenging world? Well, this is a perfect story for you. Maybe you like books where the men are men, women are women, and the communities are strong, and people have faith, ultimately, even in darkness, even in the dark times. If that's so, this book is totally for you. Pick it up. So who is this book not for? Well, some very dark things do happen in this book, and I want to be forthright. I'm not going to go into details. You might want to give it a pass if you don't want to read about nasty things happening to innocent people. It's not graphic, but some very sad things do happen, and so I just want to be forthright about that. So how about you? Have you read The Warwolf by Hermann? Do you want to read it? Let me know in the comments. And hey, maybe you have other historical fiction about the 30 Years' War. I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us to grow the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll hope to catch you on the next video.